Hi, AJ. I want to introduce my audience to you. I'm so happy we're going to be having our conversation today. So, for those of you who are new to AJ Parr is an internationally recognized Venezuelan journalist. He's a best-selling author. He's senior research associate at the Institute for the Scientific Study of Consciousness, ISSC. His lucid dreams and near-death-like experience led him to study comparative religion for 3 decades and become a near-death experience journalistic researcher. He has authored over 20 books on comparative religion and spirituality. He hosts the AJ Parr Spiritual Journalist YouTube channel, specializing in near-death experiences and the afterlife. So, AJ, I'm so glad for us to talk today. How about you start with your lucid dreaming experiences? I think you said you were having like as early as age 7.
Yes, I really had a very spiritual life because when I was a kid, when I was 6 years old, I used to dream a lot with angels. And somehow uh, they told me that that would cease when I turned 7. So when I turned 7, I stopped dreaming with them. And I started having nightmares. Yeah. What happened was that I used to suffer from asthma a lot, and I would start getting these nightmares. And there was one that was always coming back, a repetitive nightmare that I always had. And it was, I suddenly appeared in a tall building under construction. It was a skyscraper, uh, and only the structure was there. And I appeared right almost at the top. And I looked down and I always, froze because I was so scared. And once this started repeating itself, one night I found myself in that dream and I said, wow, this is the same dream I've been having. This looks like the same dream I've been having all over. This must be a dream. This must be a nightmare. So when I realized that I was totally awake within the dream. I was conscious that I was having a dream. And I said, okay, if it's a dream, it won't matter if I jump down. So I jumped. And as I fell, I said, wait, I want to stop. I don't want to continue falling. But I couldn't do that. I couldn't control the dream. But I said, okay, I want to imagine myself sitting on a sofa. So a sofa appeared and I was sitting on it. And I realized that I could change the dream. At first, I tried to stop falling and I couldn't change the dream. But when I wanted to create that sofa, something happened. I discovered that I was able to change the dream. So I continued falling and I said, okay, I want to be reading a comic book. So a comic book appeared and I was still sitting on the sofa, but it continued to fall. So finally, I said, okay, I want the sofa to bounce when it hits the bottom. And that's exactly what happened. When I reached the bottom, the sofa hit the ground and it bounced. And nothing happened to me. So I was really amazed with that. I woke up and I realized what I had done. And from that day on, I never had that nightmare again. And whenever I had a nightmare, and had the chance to realize that it was a nightmare, I could change it or I could focus and wake up. So I didn't know it at the time. I learned it many years later that this is known as lucid dreaming. And
Indeed.
it came naturally in my case. And I've every now and then, I still have lucid dreams in which I realize that I'm dreaming. And the last one was last week, and I can actually do experiments, and I've even called for guides sometimes they show up. I've been taken to places. I've received messages. So it's really been something interesting. However, this launched me into, from very early age, into a spiritual quest. I wanted to know more about what was going on in that dimension. And also, I started gaining interest in other religions apart from, in my case, it was I was raised up in a Catholic home. So I started searching for more answers. I remember when I was 8 years old, I I had my what they call the first communion. You know, in
Oh,
Catholic
yes.
families, you go through the first communion. So you got to get ready, you have to prepare yourself because it's the first time you are actually going to have communion. So I got ready, I prepared myself, I did my best, I prayed. But when I received my first communion, my first thought was, nothing happened. I didn't feel a thing. What is this? So I was expecting, to have like a spiritual experience because they tell you you're going to receive God. And
Absolutely.
when you, but I was really young and I said, wait, I didn't feel a thing. So I was always looking for something. And this led me at age 16 to start visiting what they call the Mission of the Divine Light. This was founded by Guru Maharaji from India. And it had many, they weren't really ashrams. They were simply a house in different parts of the states, and also in South America, in Caracas, Venezuela, where I grew up. So I heard about it, and I went there, and they started talking about the unity of religions because they considered that Buddhism, Hinduism, and Christianity were more or less alike. They talked about Jesus, they talked about Krishna, they talked about Buddha, they read different passages from the ancient scriptures. And after going there for a while, I received my first initiation and learned the 4 meditation techniques. And that really gave me my first spiritual experiences. However, I grew up, I had to go to university, I got married, and I did not continue as a heavy meditator, but I did meditate heavily during the first year.
Now, may I interject a
Yeah,
question?
go ahead.
So I'm hearing the start of this beautiful journey, and yet I'm still thinking of almost the very first thing you said, because you were saying how you saw angels or had experiences with angels, which were going to stop at age 7. They told you they
Yes.
were going to stop. So I'm curious how later on you felt like those later experiences were your first spiritual experience. I mean, I think to most people, the memories that you had with the angels would be your first spiritual experiences. So maybe
Yes,
you
yes.
can elaborate on that and what's the difference.
No, no. What I was meaning by spiritual, by the spiritual experience that I was seeking. I guess now that I'm older, I guess I was expecting like uh, uh, altered state of consciousness.
Okay. More like when we're one with God and those unitive type
Yeah,
states.
right. When you're meditation and you have a vision, or when I have had um lucid dreams and I've seen a spiritual guide and I've had some type of experience. you know, I don't want to mention drugs, but drugs can also do that. You know, psychedelics are one way of producing altered states of consciousness. So when I was 17 and I learned how to meditate, I did try magic mushrooms because I had read the books about Carlos Castaneda, you know, the teachings of Don Juan.
Right.
And this was a Mexican native shaman or healer who gave this American student mescaline. And he had his first mystical experiences. So where I lived in Venezuela, there was no mescaline. But in the Andes Mountains, one day a friend of mine came when I was graduating from high school, and he said, "Look, I'm going to the Andes Mountains and try magic mushrooms. Do you want to come?" And I said, "Okay, this was like a 12-hour ride." I said, "Okay, we have to stay there for a few days. Okay. But there are some people waiting for us." We were only like 18 and 19. We were pretty young. So when we got to the Andes, there was like a family of hippies living in a valley. And when they knew why we were there, so they had prepared like mushroom tea. Okay. So we each tried, and we were given the following instruction: take the mushroom, go to the mountains, and take different paths. Don't be together. Each of you must experience your own, you know, trip or whatever you want to call it.
Yes. Have your own journey.
Yeah. So I took a path towards the mountain, and it takes a while for the mushrooms to have effect on you. As I walked, I started noticing that 2 or 3 cows were like following me. So I continued walking. I wanted to reach a river. They told me that there was a river in the end. And I sort of felt that these cows were following me. So when I got close to the river, I sat down. And since I had learned how to meditate, I closed my eyes. I took a notepad, papers, not one of these new electronic. This was in the 70s. So I took a notebook, and I think it was either a pencil or a pen. And I wanted to ask my inner teacher. I wanted to receive a message from my inner teacher, and I wanted to know about the grand truths of religion and spirituality. And I was ready to write them down. So I sat down, I started meditating with my notebook and pen right next to me. And I started having the effects of the magic mushrooms. However, at one point, I suddenly opened my eyes and found myself surrounded by cows. So I got up, and as I stared towards the mountain, there was a mountain at the distance, another mountain. And I stared at it, and I could see that the mountain, the sky, the cows, they were all breathing with me.
Mm.
I inhaled, I saw that the sky was also inhaling the mountains too, and the cows. And I exhaled. So I had a unitive experience. I felt one with the sky, the mountains, the sky, the cows, everything that surrounded me, I realized that was part of me, or that there was only one gigantic being that I was part of. So I had that experience, and when I got up with my notebook, my notepad, and the pen. But as soon as I had that experience, I dropped it because I suddenly had all the answers that I was looking for in my mind. And then I realized that more than all the answers, it was that I had no more questions. There were no more questions. And this colossal answer that was within me was ineffable. It did not have words. It was simply a knowing. So I stayed in that state for several hours while the effects of the magic mushroom lasted. And after that, we each came back. I didn't share my story, or maybe I did, but I didn't stress on it. And we each went back to our home city, Caracas, which was, like I said, 12 hours back. So we drove, spent the night there. We took the mushrooms, spent the night there, and then the following morning we came back. This was really quick.
And you were not even sharing your experiences with one another in the car?
No, I never found out what they experienced.
Wow.
I don't know why. Maybe I tried, but I had not digested it. I had not understood what truly had happened.
Still trying to integrate it.
Right. I was trying to integrate it. But I did realize that after that, I felt that I had no need to be in any sort of religious group. And for several years, I felt I just lived my life. I didn't feel the need to continue investigating or to find answers, because I felt that there were no more questions. The answer was there. I, as we all are, I am part of oneness, and everything that exists is one. So I had that experience, and like I said, it made me stop looking for answers for many years. Of course, I uh, I went to university, I graduated, I got married, I went along with a regular life.
So then you had this experience in the mountains, and it was such a beautiful unitive experience.
But then you went on with life. And so I'd love to hear what came next that really propelled you more into this spiritual journey.
Well, I had a son. I got married. My wife had a son, and we broke up 2 years after. So I was really, I found myself like I had to reinvent myself. And then I started finding the need once more for more explanations. And this was my late 20s. So around 10 years had gone by. I continued reading books about spirituality and all that. I always loved to read about them. And I was always interested in that. But since when I broke up with my wife, I started seeking other religions. I did not like Catholicism, the Catholic Church anymore. I did not consider myself a Catholic. I liked Hinduism more. So I had known about Maharishi Mahesh Yogi because he was the guru of the Beatles. And once again I heard that there was someone in Caracas teaching transcendental meditation, an instructor that had been initiated by the guru of the Beatles. So I said, wow, great. Let me see. So I went there and I learned transcendental meditation, which is basically mantra meditation. So I received my mantra and I started repeating it, meditating. After that, I discovered the Jose Silva mind control. I don't know if you've heard about it. I took that too. And I started reading books about metaphysics and also about the Hermetic schools, the schools that follow the teachings of Hermes Trismegistus. He was apparently an Egyptian spiritual teacher, later said to be Greek, from ancient Greece. But he had the ancient tradition that gave way to what is known as the Kybalion and the 7 laws of the universe, which the first one is the law of mentalism. And they talk about all these laws. The movie The Secret is also based on several of these laws. But back then, The Secret hadn't even been conceived. So I read that about the existence of the Great White Brotherhood or the Ascended Masters. These are supposedly invisible spiritual masters that dwell near the earth in temples that are above our atmosphere, and they teach those who are seeking knowledge. So I always had who I called my invisible master, my inner master. So I said, wow, maybe they too are like my inner masters. And I started looking for a Hermetic school. I wanted to be initiated in one of these traditions. I had read about the Templars, also the Rosicrucians.
Mm-hmm.
However, the Templars were destroyed in the Middle Ages. And also the Rosicrucians, the only thing that they offered were like a mail order lessons, yeah.
By
So
mail.
by mail, yeah. You had to pay them a monthly fee, and they would send you by mail, regular mail, a monthly lesson. So I wasn't attracted to that. I didn't want that. And I heard about the Freemasons. When I started researching about the Freemasonry, I realized that a lot of the founders of the United States had been Freemasons. Also, the founders of Venezuela, where I grew up, had been Freemasons. And I said, okay, I'm going to try. And then when I asked my father, he told me that my grandfather, his father, had been a Freemason. So it's really hard to get into the Freemasonry. But if your father or your grandfather were Freemasons, it's easier. It's what they call a Louis Vuitton. So I went there. My grandfather had already died. But as soon as I stepped into the temple to ask for information. This old guy, he saw me and he said, huh, you must be the grandson. And he told me my grandfather's name because you look exactly like him. And I said, what? So when I spoke to him, yeah, he said, yeah, you can come in, you can join. It will take a while, etc. It actually took a year. However, I was expecting, to learn about the invisible masters and all that. But no, it was more like a man's club where they did share symbolic teachings. Everything was a symbol in the temple with inside. And the teaching was really interesting, what they call the Catholicism. The lessons, the written lessons that you had to read and memorize were full of symbolic teachings. However, they just repeated what they had to say. They went on with their ceremonies. And somehow I felt that something was missing. However, when I received my initiation, my first, I was always thinking of, the invisible teachers. I was say
Yes.
I was thinking, I may be having an initiation here on Earth, but I'm also having one up there. So I went through the first 3 grades. Originally, the Hermetic schools only had 3 grades or ranks: the apprentice, companion, and master. And then in 1777, the British created 33 grades.
Of course they did.
So, and each time when you join the Freemasons, you have to pay a lot of money. And each time you go to a higher grade, you also need to pay a lot of money. You have to you receive an initiation, but after that, there's a banquet, a meal with all the members of the lodge, and that costs money. And plus, you have to pay a fee, an established fee. So I guess that's why they did it. They took it to 33 degrees, from 3 to 33. So what I was thinking always is that, okay, I'm gonna get to the 3rd degree, to masters. Once I get there, I will decide if I continue or not, because my interest is not to be a Freemason here. My interest is to see if I can join that higher school of knowledge. So I passed the apprentice and the companion, and I became a master. But I didn't get what I wanted. I did start having dreams in which I had to pass tests, and they spoke to me, but I started feeling that I did not need the Freemasons here on Earth to continue my path.
Which makes sense.
Yeah, one night I had this test in a dream, and I passed it, and I was admitted in one of these invisible lodges. I don't know if it was a dream or not. Mystical dreams are hard to define.
Yes, I find them qualitatively different than subconscious dreams.
Right. So I was admitted into a lodge with a name, and they celebrated it. But this was the tests were harder and harder. In my dreams, I had to face my most terrible fears. And I started failing these tests. And this took years, several years, to reach the third grade and to go through these tests. And when I turned 34, I gave up. I said, okay, if I didn't pass the test, it means I'm not worthy. Thanks a lot. And I had like a discussion with God, an argument, or I even yelled at him and said, okay, if that's what you want, I won't continue. You hear that? I started having this big argument because, Jesus died at age 33, and I had always expected that by age 33, I would be having this super mystical experience, or that I would, have something more than sporadic dreams. So I had this big argument with God. I told him practically to forget about it, that I wasn't going to continue seeking anything from him. Thanks a lot, or thanks for nothing. More that was
I think I've had a few of those irreverent moments myself.
Yeah, I was very irreverent.
Yes.
And that's when 3 weeks ago, 3 weeks after that, not 3 weeks after that, more or less, I had the most mind-blowing experience I have ever had.
Including from magic mushrooms or
yeah, magic mushrooms was kindergarten.
Kindergarten.
Yes, this
so
was.
Eager to hear about this one. This one, you're age 34 at this point.
Yeah, I turned 34. I told that to God. And, I always suffered from asthma. In some of these asthma attacks, I passed out, or I had to spend the whole night trying to breathe, struggling for air. And sometimes I had like visions, or I could see monsters or witches. So, but sometimes when I had these asthma attacks, I appeared in this dark void, completely frozen. They call it, I later learned they call it sleep paralysis. Okay. But I had a whole bunch of these sleep paralysis cases. And
at that moment, you're usually awake and you're trying to move your body, but you can't.
Right. You're right. You're usually awake. Okay, so one night I went to sleep like any other day, and I had during 3 nights in a row, I woke up in that dark place. I did not have sleep paralysis, but I knew I was in this dark place. It was so dark that I raised my hands to see if I could see them. No, there was no way. And I could feel that something could be in the darkness. I felt like a presence.
You could feel presence in the darkness.
Yes.
In the void.
The first 2 times I woke up, and each time I woke up, I gasped for air. It was like I had, stopped breathing.
Sleep apnea.
Yeah, sleep apnea could have been. So I was later diagnosed with sleep apnea many years later. But those first 2 nights, I always woke up gasping, and after being in this dark, intensely dark space, apparently I had woken up. I was wide awake in this black void. Now the third time, that was the one that blew my mind, because I was there once again. I said, wow, how can this be a third time, man? What's going on? But I was not focused on my thoughts. I didn't continue worrying about that. I was really scared of the darkness because I felt stronger than ever. I felt a presence in the darkness, and there was no way to see it. I couldn't even see my hands. So, you know, when you're scared, you feel it in your chest. It's almost like an empty feeling, or it also happens when you're falling down, you know, that it's like you feel your chest like expanding.
Yes.
I was really terrified because the presence was there. And then I heard a voice. So I was right. There was a presence. And the voice said, tranquilo, which means either relax or surrender. I felt like taking it easy. And after that, the only things it said was, all is one.
So tranquilo and all is one.
Todo es uno, all is one. This was
Todo es uno.
when I heard that, it's not that I decided to. I simply trusted the voice, and I felt if everything is one, then somehow the voice that's talking to me could be me, or is me, because if everything is one, you're also me, everything is me. So I realized that quickly, in a fraction of a second, I realized that I had to trust. However, the feeling I had in my chest, that expansion did not go away. I said, wait, I'm relaxing now. Why am I still feeling this? And I realized that it was not what we feel when we're scared is not fear. It's this emptiness that lies within you, which is basically our essence. And it started growing. And I said, wait, why am I feeling that it's growing if I'm no longer fearful? Because I had no option. When it said those words, I simply surrendered. I said, okay, let it be. Whatever comes will come. However, my chest continued expanding. And then I realized, wow, this is not fear, what I'm feeling. This is something else. And it started growing. And it grew larger and larger. It grew bigger than me, bigger than my house, bigger than the planet. And then, I don't know if there was a big explosion or what, but I suddenly found myself in the middle of a gigantic star, infinite star, of a body of light. And I was the light. There was no more trace of me. When I was there, I could see up and I would see light. Could look down, I would see light. To the right, to the left, in all directions, there was light, and I could see in all directions at the same time.
Yes.
And when you look up and you look down at the same time, you should see your body in between. But no, there was no body. There was just that empty, hollow feeling in the middle of the star. And as I gazed, I still don't know, since I could see in all directions at the same time, I could also see in the distant portions of the light, and I could also like focus on the center of the light. I could focus on one ray of light and see that surrounding that ray of light was an empty space where it existed. So I could feel that this star was empty. It had the empty space and it was full of light at the same time. So I could feel empty and full at the same time.
Beautiful.
So I was the star, and I also was the space or the emptiness where that star existed. It's like, what is the glass? The glass is the container or the empty space within it. Without the empty space within it, there would be no glass. So it was really, it was a knowing.
So you could feel the fullness and the essence and the emptiness and the space.
I was the light. I did not recall my AJ. I had no memory of ever being human. I had I guess I had no thoughts, no verbal thoughts. I did have an awareness. I was aware of everything. And although I say sometimes that if I focused on the center, I could see the middle of the star, and if I focused on the furthest part of the light, I could focus on it, or each ray, but it's not linear. I could focus on all of them at the same time. So this was mind-blowing. This was, I could not even, there was no need for thoughts. This was a bliss. I can only compare it to a bliss and the feeling that I was one with all that existed. This had, like I said, while I was there, I had no thoughts. I didn't wonder anything. I was just there. Shh. There was this sound also, mind-blowing. Everything was mind-blowing. I can still concentrate and go back to that place. And that place belongs to another kind of memory, because that was multidimensional. It was not a 3D, it's not a 3D memory, you know, like, or when you think about a chair, you see it, you know, 3-dimensionally. This is something that was from another dimension.
Well, and it sounds like kind of dimension within dimension within dimension with dimension, because you're seeing and it being all at the same time.
Well, I don't know what it was, but I call it oneness, okay?
Yes.
I went into oneness, and oneness is something I had experienced in a minor scale when I did the mushrooms. But this was the experience. So after that, I don't know how long I stayed there because everything was happening at the same time. I don't know. It felt like it was eternal. But when I woke up, once again, I reached for air, I gasped, and I said, "What the hell?" I grabbed my head, trying to hold my memory, but there it was.
Mm.
And I could still feel it. I could still feel, normally when you're in this world, if you look ahead like I am right now, in my back, or in the back part of your mind, it's dark, okay? You see what you're seeing, but I could not see behind my back now, but I could feel my awareness went in all directions at the same time. So usually we block our rear awareness and focus on the awareness in front or as far as your eyes can see. But you are aware of the back part of your body too. You simply don't focus on it much. But at that moment, I felt that my mind, my head, or my body was blocking my awareness behind, that it was somehow filtering my hemispherical awareness.
Exactly.
I felt I was like a sphere or a hemisphere.
Yes.
I felt that my true form was a sphere.
Yes.
And was the form that this star had. But I was already awake. I could feel that I was still a sphere, and I could feel that everything in my room was part of me. Everything I saw was part of that awareness, because
Yes.
that awareness stretched away from me into everything that surrounded me. So I got up without understanding anything and completely mind blown. And I went to the nearest wall. I pressed my hand to the nearest wall because I felt that I was everything with everything, or that I was one with everything. Sorry,
Yes.
and when I pressed the wall, I felt myself pressing the wall. I felt that I was the hand pressing the wall, but I was the wall pressing back. So I said, "What?" I was the wall pressing back. I was not only this, but I was also that.
Yes.
Many years later, I realized that this has been observed by many Hindu teachers, and it's part of the Vedas and other ancient scriptures. Thou art that. So when I realized this, I simply was blown away. I couldn't get back to sleep. I simply went out. I waited for the sun to come out. I could still feel it, but it started fading slowly. So the next day, as it continued to fade, or during the whole day, I was asking God, what the hell happened? What is this? What is this? And that night, the following night, I was awake, and all of a sudden, I continued asking, I want an explanation. And I felt the presence of a very, very old man. I couldn't see him, but I felt his presence. And I realized he was so old and so wrinkled. I don't know why, but I more or less could perceive an image, but it was not a visual image.
Yes.
I started to cry because I said, wow, you are so old. You are so old. You're as old as mankind, I said. And then I got like a download. I got a download. It was a brief poem. Now, this poem simply came to me, but it was the answer I was looking for. So it was simply this. In the beginning was the one. But the one was alone and he wanted to play. So he divided himself into two and gave number two amnesia, and thus the game began.
And that was the download.
Yeah, that was the only explanation I got. That was the download. And that was the answer that I needed. I also felt that it was the explanation of the creation of the universe. I also realized that this old man, as old as mankind, was probably number two or the first created intelligent being. I don't know. And I also felt that everything that surrounds us is a part of God. So the following days, since I had already had like a spiritual quest, I had many books and I picked up the Gospels, and I realized that things like the truth will set you free. I found a new meaning in that, and I found a new meaning in the kingdom of God is within you. Found a
Yes.
new meaning in that, and I started finding new meanings in certain parts of the scriptures, and also the Bhagavad Gita and the Tao Te Ching, which were other books I had, and I started understanding certain parts, not everything, of these ancient scriptures. And then I realized the more I studied these ancient religions, the more I understood that oneness is the root secret behind all religions. The secret behind all religions is that there is only one teaching. And what is that teaching? The one. Yeah, so I started getting into what they call comparative study of religions. I started a more serious intellectual quest to find the true spiritual path behind all these paths. And I discovered many things that, for example, in the Gospels, the first Christians were not known as Christians. They were known as the followers of the path. And who followed originally what they call Sanatana Dharma is also known as the eternal path. Buddhism, or the Buddhists, they follow the Dharma, and it's also known as the path.
Yes, and the Eightfold Path.
Yes, and the Taoists also followed the path. So I said, wow, there seems to be like an ancient original teaching called the path. What is it?
The path and the way.
The way, also. The way or the path. Yes.
Yes.
They're used as synonymous.
Synonymous, for sure.
The way or the path. So what I basically discovered is that yes, we are one. Yes, everything we look around is part of us, but it's also an illusion, the illusion of separation.
Yes.
And also it's an illusion because we are really the one having this dream or this illusion. You could say that we are in a matrix. Yeah, you could say that number one, in order to divide himself into two and create him and give himself amnesia, created this illusory world of dualism which is like a matrix. In the world of oneness, there is no duality. In this world where we have duality, we exist as individuals, but it is obviously an illusion. The Hindus call it Maya.
Mhm.
Jesus also talked about gathering treasures, not for this world, but for the other. So he also talked about two worlds, two dimensions. The real, the truth shall set you free, and this mundane world of desire. So Buddha also talked about the world of desire and the illusion of desire. And I started realizing that, yeah, they do speak the same language. The teaching is the same one. So 10 years later, I started writing about this. 20 years later, took me a while. 20 years later, I always thought that I was not worthy of writing about it because only spiritual masters or teachers wrote about these things. But I said, okay, I'm going to write it from a journalistic point of view or from a researcher's point of view. I'm not a spiritual teacher. I'm not a spiritual master, but I'm going to write about this. So I wrote my first book, which was basically about this teaching. And then I continued writing, and I wrote around 20 books during the following 10 years, or during the 10 years of my life. I've written over 20 books. And up to 2 or 3 years ago, 3 years ago, maybe a little bit more, I still hadn't found anyone with an experience more or less like mine, because I did get into, I did visit or meet, or I even went for classes with the Buddhists, with the Gnostics, with Hindus, with the followers of Sai Baba. I started reading a lot the Upanishads. I started reading about the Gnostics. And I was also initiated into the Gnostics. I didn't go back to the Freemasons for the reasons that I explained, but I did try to find more rational explanations this time, more than an experience. I had enough of, I had my experience, but I was trying to explain it, explain what? How can all religions be really the same despite their differences?
Absolutely.
Okay, so when I was in each of these religions, I always ask, look, have you ever had an experience where you became one with the universe? No, no, no. I even asked the highest members, have you ever had one of these experiences? No. Okay. But one day, about 3 or 4 years ago, since I was publishing all these books, I opened a publishing services agency, and I started publishing books for other people, and that's how I make a living these days. I publish books for people. So I had one client suddenly showed up. She was a Spanish girl, and she had published her book in Spanish and wanted a translation in English and wanted me to publish it. Her book was called 24 Minutes on the Other Side. And she had a near-death experience. So when I started talking to her and working on her book and talking to her once more, we actually had a lot of conversations about her experience. When I told her my experience, and told her I had been in this dark place. And she said, yeah, they call it the void. A lot of near-death experiencers visited. And when I told her that I had been in the light, yeah, they also see the light. You know, a lot of near-death experiencers see the light. Yeah, but I could see up and down in all directions. No, yeah, that's what they call 360-degree vision.
Yes.
And I said, yeah, but I felt one with everything. Yeah, that's common, she said. I think you had a near-death experience. And I said, well, but I never died. But I think I did stop breathing. And she said, well, you could have had a near-death like experience, but it sounds like a near-death experience. So I didn't really know what to think. So I switched my focus to near-death experiences.
So from the comparative religions to the near-death research.
The comparative religion has a mystery. Why are all religions, despite the fact that they look so different, they share common roots? And NDEs also have a similar mystery. Why do all NDEs seem to be so different, yet share common traits?
So I'd like us to take a couple of tangents there. One, before we leave religions too far, one of your writings, I think, was about the esoteric teachings of Christ, or, you know, a lot of things that maybe have been forgotten. Is there anything there that you could share to viewers that, let's say, most Christians miss?
The secret teachings of Jesus. Well, there I do a rational analysis of certain parts of the gospel in which I evidence that Jesus had a secret teaching that he imparted only among his apostles. And he mentions it in the Bible, but you have to really look for it to find it.
But he does mention it, yes.
Well, he does mention it, and he also says that that's why he spoke in parables to the rest. But to the apostles, he says in the gospel, he had what he calls the secret teachings of heaven. And he said that only to them. And I also
only to them. And what came next?
Not only to them it would be revealed, to his inner circle. Okay, so most esoteric schools or Hermetic schools, they operate or function that way. They have an outer teaching. They have an outer teaching or exoteric teaching for the masses, and they have an esoteric or inner teaching for the selected group of disciples. So, well, that's what I talk about, and I also compare his teaching with the esoteric teachings of Buddhism, Hinduism, and all that. So whoever's interested in my book, I think it's one of the books that I like the most, written before my my NDE research. It's called The Secret Teachings of Jesus.
So then you started going into all of the NDE research, and you said this was just 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, 3 or 4 years ago, I said, okay, I'm going to start interviewing, since this woman, Tessa Romero, the author of 24 Minutes on the Other Side, had this experience. I said, wait, I'm going to find out more about these people. And I knew there were YouTube videos and all that, but I said, no. I'm a researcher. I need to get hold of these people, interview them, and see what I can find. And so far, I've interviewed over 100 near-death experiencers. I've posted all my interviews on my YouTube channel, AJ Parr, spiritual journalist channel. And I've written 2 books as a result of my research, and I'm working on my 3rd book right now. The first book was called Stairway to Heaven. After interviewing a lot of people, I said, okay, I want to analyze, after I had interviewed that many experiencers, I said, okay, I want to find out if there are commonalities among the people who claim to have had a Christian NDE.
Hmm.
Why Christian? Because I wanted to start out with only a group, you know?
Yes.
Plus, most people are Christian. So I said, okay, let me try to find if there are any commonalities. So I wrote this book, Stairway to Heaven, 25 near-death experiences, 25 near-death experiences about encounters with God, Jesus, and paradise. And here I compared these 25 cases, and I reached, or I identified 9 common elements. So this book grouping these experiences and mentioning when these experiences displayed these 9 elements. After that, more recently, I wrote this other book, The Girl Who Visited Heaven, and Other Children's Near-Death Experiences. This second book was focused exclusively on near-death experiences of children aged 9 or younger, but most of them are age 5 or younger. There are even kids who were age 2 or 3 when they had their experience. Of course, all of these were adults when I interviewed them, not kids. But I also found certain similarities. And the book I'm writing on, the book I'm writing right now is about why near-death experiencers are so different yet so alike. And I'm also working on a presentation for IONS, which will be this March. And here I bring in practically all the knowledge I've gained throughout the years, not only in comparative, during my comparative study of religion, but also what I've learned from quantum physics, philosophy, psychology, and near-death experience research.
So you first reached out to me after you found my 2017 conference presentation that combined quantum physics and psychology and spirituality, and was really focused on helping to validate experiencers. And so here I am aware of your interest in quantum physics and certainly the background that you've just shared. What I'd love for you to address is, how has what you've learned in quantum physics, how has it actually impacted you and helped you as an experiencer, right? Because we have these experiences, then we have all these questions, and then you and I aren't alone. There's many of us who start venturing into quantum physics because we're seeking answers. And I would love for you to share what has really hit you the most with that. What's helped the most?
Well, the first thing that stood out, this was many years ago, was that there was something known as quantum physics. When I was in my early teens, my grandfather published a book, scientific book, and he talked about physics and quantum physics. So back then, I became aware of, for example, this Heisenberg effect, that when you observe reality, it changes,
Mm-hmm.
modifies. I also learned that the atoms, which seem to be solid, when you examine them at a more microscopic level, they become waves instead of particles, and they have that dual property. Later on in life, I learned about the double slit experiment, and learned that actually observation can determine if an electron is perceived as a particle or a wave. Simply the act of measuring it or observing it modifies it. So I knew all this, and I had always wondered if these spiritual realms, not the one that I went to, because that was out of this world, but I was wondering if the spiritual realm where spirits and dead people go could be quantic. But then when I started doing my NDE research, I started reading more about authors who have tried to explain certain characteristics found in NDEs through quantum physics, especially through non-locality. And not many have done this study, but others, like, for example, the Tao of Physics by Fritjof Capra, talks a lot about how quantum physics and the spiritual world tie in. So I was always wondering about this. And that's why I contacted you, because I saw your presentation and you gave a really nice explanation of what quantum physics is, how it got started, and how it could influence near-death experiences. And that's why we're doing this, because I contacted you, and we met, we talked several times, and I appreciate your help.
Oh, well, absolutely.
I've been interested in quantum physics, in the evolution of the human being, in psychology, parapsychology. Everything that is scientific attracts me. The DNA, and also, of course, science fiction with time travel and all those things.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been pretty scientifically oriented all my life. And I like these topics either for the fun of it or because it amazes me. And in this case, simply because it can help me with my new research, which is why NDEs are so different yet so alike.
So recently, I think you have another book out, Message to Humanity. And
Well, that was a Message for Humanity. I was one of the co-writers. This was written by Dr. Melvin Morse and 3 or 4 other members of the Institute for the Scientific Study of Consciousness participated in it. This was a study of mediumship in which I helped to analyze the results, and I was in charge of certain parts of the final report that are included in the book, and also 2 brief chapters where I talk about mainly about Allan Kardec, who was one of the first to do a more or less scientific study of mediumship in the 1800s.
Is there anything that you want to share about what this message to humanity is that is important for everyone to know?
Well, the message for humanity is that if we don't learn the lessons of unconditional love, we are on the risk of hurting or destroying this planet, because the spiritual side or the spiritual realm, through different ways, has tried to make us realize that the spiritual world does exist, but mankind is mostly materialistic and is doing harm to the planet. But one of the other messages is that we as humans only learn by making mistakes and by having problems, and that wars, catastrophes, they are great lessons for us. And sometimes they are the only mean through which we can learn.
Yes, and when you were talking about the important message of unconditional love, when people have asked me in the past, what do these comparative religions have in common? I love the way you described it as the one way, the one path, we're all one. My answer is usually love, because when we think of love, we think of how we are individual and we are a couple, or we are a family, or we are an all at the same time. And so to me, when all of these religions essentially get to the point of talking about oneness and interconnectedness, they're actually speaking about love. So to me, no wonder Christ said the greatest of these is love. And no wonder that, like you said, all of these messages are about how do we realize that we're all interconnected. We are all one. Whatever we do to the part is experienced in the whole, and whatever is experienced in the whole will be felt in the part. Like you said, there is no separation. And so we as humanity certainly need to hear that message over and over again. Is there, before we end for today, is there any other information you would really like viewers to walk away with? And before we end, I will certainly want you to make sure they know how to contact you or what have you.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. And my final message is that you have to continue growing spiritually and realize that if we are all one, and if love is simply the realization that we are one with others, then we can all try to make this world a better place. And regarding my presentation this will be on the 15th of March this year. It will be online, organized by IANS, and it's called the Tower of Babel Syndrome: Why NDEs Are So Different Yet So Alike. You can go to the IANS website and subscribe, and you can find all my books in Amazon. If you go to Amazon and in the search engine type AJ Parr, you can find all my books there. Also, those who are interested in visiting my YouTube channel, you can go to YouTube and type my name, AJ Parr, and you will find among the results the AJ Parr Spiritual Journalist podcast. My books are also in Audible. And I also have, like I mentioned, I have a publishing services publishing services agency for those who are interested in writing and publishing their books on Amazon. I basically focus on Amazon because that's my experience. And whoever wants to get in touch with me can do so by writing at my email, ajparr@gmail.com. ajparr@gmail.com. Once again, Valerie, this has been a great conversation, and have a blessed day.
Well, thank you, AJ, so much. I really appreciate it.